The Pacific Ocean stretched endless and gray beyond the observation fence at Camp Pendleton, waves breaking against the cliffs in patterns that hadn't changed in a million years. Eleanor Vaughn stood watching them, her hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup that had gone cold an hour ago. 76 years old, 15 years retired, 4 years a widow. Nobody here knew her name anymore. The parking lot behind her was filling up with the morning shift. Young Marines in fresh utilities, their boots still shiny, their faces still soft. They walked past her like she was furniture. An old woman in a faded windbreaker gray hair, pulled back in a practical bun. Invisible. She preferred it that way. Most days, the coffee shop down the road knew her order. Black coffee, no sugar. Whole wheat toast, no butter. The waitress called her Hyun and never asked about the Marine Corps Times she read cover to cover every morning. Never asked why a 76-year-old woman drove 43 miles from Oceanside just to sit in a diner and read about a world that had moved on without her. Nell folded the newspaper and tucked it under her arm. The morning sun was climbing higher now, burning off the coastal fog. In another hour, the rifle ranges would be active. She could hear them from the civilian observation area. The crack of M4 carbines, the deeper boom of the M240 machine guns, the rhythmic thunder that used to be the soundtrack of her life. She walked slowly toward the observation platform, her knees protesting each step. Arthritis in both joints. The doctors had suggested replacement surgery. She'd declined. What was the point? She wasn't going anywhere important. The observation area was empty this early. Just a wooden platform with safety barriers and informational plaques explaining what visitors were watching. Marines qualifying on various weapons systems. The future of American defense preparing for wars in places most civilians couldn't find on a map. Nell had been to most of those places. Not as a Marine, she'd never had that honor, but as a civilian weapons specialist, a technical expert who'd spent 43 years making sure the rifles in Marines' hands actually worked when it mattered. She'd held more weapons than most of these kids would see in 10 lifetimes. But nobody knew that. Nobody asked. On the dashboard of her car, wedged into the sun visor, was a photograph. Her daughter Vivian, at age 16, wearing a blue dress, smiling for the camera at some school dance. The photograph was 12 years old, the last time they'd spoken without lawyers involved. Nell didn't look at it anymore. Looking hurt too much. The rifle range below her was starting to fill up with activity. A platoon of young Marines moving into position, their instructor's voice carrying across the distance. Commands that sounded harsh to civilian ears, but were just the normal cadence of military training. Lane 7 caught her attention. 3 Marines clustered around the table, components of an M27 infantry automatic rifle, spread out like puzzle pieces. Their body language told the story before Nell could see their faces. Frustration, confusion, the particular kind of loss that comes when you're supposed to know something but don't. The instructor, a sergeant with crossed rifles on his collar, stood with arms folded, watching, not helping. That was the old way. Let them figure it out. Let them struggle until they learned. Nell understood that philosophy. She'd lived it for decades, but she also knew when struggle crossed the line into something dangerous, when not knowing could get someone killed. 20 minutes passed. The 3 Marines were no closer to assembling the weapon. One of them, a thin kid with nervous hands, kept picking up the bolt carrier group and staring at it like it would whisper its secrets. Nell's fingers twitched at her sides. Muscle memory from 1,000 demonstrations. She could close her eyes and disassemble an M27 in under a minute. The new model, the one these kids were struggling with, based on the Heckler & Koch 416 platform. Short-stroke gas piston system, more reliable than the old direct impingement, especially in desert conditions. She'd consulted on the Marine Corps adaptation back in 2010, her last year before retirement. 7 months in Germany, working with the engineers, arguing about gas port sizing and buffer spring tension. The Germans wanted to use a heavier buffer. She'd insisted on the lighter one, faster cycle rate, better reliability in extreme cold. She'd been right, of course. She usually was. The thin kid dropped the bolt carrier group. The clatter of metal on the table carried across the range. The sergeant barked something Nell couldn't hear, but she could read his body language. Disappointment, anger, the weight of a schedule being thrown off because 3 Marines couldn't perform a basic task. Nell took a step closer to the fence, then another. Her better judgment told her to stay back, to mind her own business. Nobody wanted an old woman's input. She'd learned that lesson at the hardware store when she'd tried to help a clerk understand torque specifications. She'd learned it at the VA hospital when she'd suggested a different approach to a young doctor. People smiled politely and ignored her. That was how the world worked when you were old. But watching these kids struggle with a weapon system she understood intimately, it gnawed at something deep inside. The part that remembered being young herself, overwhelmed, struggling, until someone had taken the time to show her the right way. The thin Marine was holding the upper receiver completely wrong, about to try forcing the charging handle in from the right side. In 30 seconds, he was going to strip those threads. Nell had seen it happen before. Young soldiers who muscled things instead of understanding them. Broken components, disciplinary action, sometimes injuries when weapons failed at the worst possible moment. She moved without thinking. Her legs carried her past the observation barrier, closer to the range fence, close enough to call out. The sergeant noticed her first. His head turned, eyes narrowing. Civilians weren't supposed to be this close to active training. Nell raised her voice, the command tone that never quite leaves someone who spent 4 decades teaching. Excuse me, that charging handle goes in from the left side, not the right. All 4 Marines turned. The thin kid froze, the upper receiver still in his hands. The sergeant's expression shifted from frustration to annoyance. Ma'am, his voice was polite but firm, professional distance. This is a restricted training area. I need you to step back to the observation platform. I understand, Sergeant. I was just trying to help. That young man is about to damage the weapon. We appreciate your interest in Marine Corps training. The sergeant cut her off, his tone making it clear he appreciated nothing of the sort. But these Marines need to figure this out themselves. It's part of their learning process. The thin Marine glanced at Nell. Something between hope and embarrassment flickered across his face. We've got this, ma'am. Thank you. His voice was kind. That made it worse somehow. Nell started to retreat, started to apologize, started to disappear back into invisibility where she belonged. Then one of the other Marines muttered something, just loud enough to carry. A stocky kid with a Boston accent. Great, now grandmas are teaching Marines. What's next? The third Marine laughed, not cruel laughter exactly, just the thoughtless kind. The dismissive chuckling that cuts deeper than mockery because it doesn't even consider you worth mocking seriously. Nell felt her face flush, felt the familiar shame of being irrelevant, of being the old woman who didn't know when to shut up and disappear. Her hands were shaking slightly, partly the arthritis, partly something else. My apologies, Sergeant. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. Didn't mean to interfere. She turned away, started walking back toward the observation area, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, she heard the Marines return to their struggle, heard the thin one curse softly as something clattered to the table again. Nell kept walking. This was why she usually just watched in silence. This was why she kept her knowledge to herself. Let the world move on without her. She was just an old woman watching young people do things that used to matter. The parking lot was almost in sight when she heard the voice. Gunner Vaughn. Nell froze. The voice came from behind her, male, middle-aged, and it carried a quality she hadn't heard directed at her in years, respect mixed with disbelief. She turned slowly. A Marine officer was approaching, full colonel, his uniform crisp, his rank insignia catching the morning sun. Maybe 55 years old, iron gray hair cut high and tight, the kind of weathered face that spoke of time in combat zones, of decisions that kept him awake at night. He stopped 10 feet away. His eyes were scanning her face with growing recognition, like he was looking at a ghost. Gunner, he said again. Eleanor Vaughn, is that really you? The word hit her like a physical blow. Gunner, her old rank, Chief Warrant Officer 4, a rank so specialized that most people outside the Corps had never heard of it. A rank that meant you were the absolute master of infantry weapons systems, the person that even colonels came to for answers. Nell managed. Yes, I'm Eleanor Vaughn. The colonel's face transformed. He straightened to attention, rendered a sharp salute, crisp and precise. Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Sullivan, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. You probably don't remember me. The name triggered something in Nell's memory. Sullivan, late 20s, struggling with crew-served weapons. The M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun. 25 years ago, give or take. The flashback came unbidden. 29 Palms, California. Summer heat that made the air shimmer. A young second lieutenant with fresh gold bars standing next to an M2 machine gun that refused to fire correctly. Timing off. Headspace wrong, the weapon that could tear an engine block apart rendered useless by fractions of an inch. Nell had been 51 then, already 24 years into her career, already legendary in certain circles, though she never thought of herself that way. The young lieutenant had been on the verge of failing the heavy weapons officer course. One more day of bad performance, and he'd be sent back to his unit without qualification. Career effectively over before it started. She'd found him at the range after hours. 7 p.m. sun, setting the desert cooling down. He'd been there alone, staring at the M2 like it was a puzzle he'd never solve. Nell had walked over, introduced herself, asked if he wanted help. 4 hours they'd worked. Nell's hands guiding his through the delicate process of setting headspace and timing on the Ma Deuce. The careful measurement, the precise adjustments, the difference between a weapon that worked and one that could kill the operator. By 11 p.m., Sullivan had it. Not just mechanically, he understood it. The why behind the what. The principles that would let him troubleshoot any weapon, not just this one. He'd thanked her. She told him to pay it forward someday. That was 25 years ago. I remember, Nell said quietly, you had trouble with the M2 timing, but you got it eventually. Sullivan's eyes were wet, a colonel with combat ribbons on his chest, and his eyes were wet. Because you stayed 3 extra hours after class when everyone else had written me off. You sat with me until I understood. You saved my career, ma'am. The sergeant from the rifle range had approached, his expression uncertain now. The 3 young Marines followed, their earlier dismissiveness replaced by confusion. Sullivan turned to address them, his voice carrying the weight of command. Marines, I need you to understand who you're talking to. He gestured to Nell. This is Chief Warrant Officer 4 Eleanor Vaughn, retired, 43 years of service to the Marine Corps and the Department of Defense. The thin Marine's eyes went wide. Gunner Vaughn was the senior civilian weapons specialist at Quantico from 1985 to 2008. She field-tested every major infantry weapon system adopted between 1980 and 2010. Sullivan was warming to his subject now, the kind of introduction Nell had spent her entire career trying to avoid. The M16A2 you trained on, the M4 carbine, the M249 SAW, the M27 you're struggling with right now. Gunner Vaughn consulted on all of them. She didn't just test them, she helped design the gas systems. She wrote the training manuals you're holding. She trained the instructors who trained your instructors. The Boston kid's face had gone pale, the one who'd made the crack about grandmothers. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. The sergeant spoke up, his voice respectful now, but uncertain. Ma'am, we didn't know. I apologize for... How could you? Nell interrupted gently. I'm just an old woman watching Marines train. You were doing your job, Sergeant, protecting your training area, so I respect that. Sullivan turned to her. Ma'am, you could help these Marines. They're struggling with the M27 because we just received them last month. Our instructor certification is still pending. We're learning as we go. He paused, a slight smile. Unless you're too busy to show these young Marines how it's done. Nell looked at the 3 junior Marines. The thin one was staring at her with something approaching awe. The Boston kid couldn't meet her eyes. They were so young, so eager despite their earlier bravado. Reminded her of every Marine she'd ever taught. She remembered being that young once, remembered the terror of not measuring up, remembered the people who'd helped her when she needed it. I suppose I could take a look, Nell said. They returned to Lane 7. A small crowd had formed now. Sullivan, the sergeant, the 3 Marines, a handful of others who'd heard Sullivan's proclamation and wanted to see the legend in action. The M27 lay there in pieces on the table, a puzzle these young men couldn't solve. Nell stood before it. Her arthritis was protesting, joints stiff from the walk and the tension, but her hands knew what to do. 43 years of muscle memory doesn't fade just because you get old. She flexed her fingers, drew a breath. The M27 is derived from the Heckler & Koch 416, she began, her voice taking on the cadence of an instructor. Clear, precise, the voice that had taught thousands, which itself is an improvement on Eugene Stoner's gas system. The key difference from the M16 you're familiar with is the short-stroke gas piston. She lifted the component, held it up so everyone could see. This keeps carbon fouling out of the bolt carrier group, makes the weapon more reliable in adverse conditions. Desert sand, jungle humidity, Arctic cold, places where the old direct impingement system would fail. Her hands moved as she spoke, not fast. Her fingers didn't move fast anymore, but certain, each motion economical and precise. Buffer spring into the lower receiver, the familiar click as it seated, bolt carrier group properly oriented. She held it up, rotated it so the Marines could see the gas key alignment. Gas key forward, never backward. You can feel the difference if you pay attention. Sliding the bolt carrier into the upper receiver. The satisfying sound of metal on metal engineered to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, charging handle inserted from the left. Locked into place with pressure from her thumb, the arthritis making her wince, but her hand never wavering. The handguard assembly locks with these two pins, not screws. Common mistake, you push here, she demonstrated, and rotate counterclockwise. The gas block aligns with these grooves, not by force, by proper orientation. 53 seconds and the upper and lower receivers came together. The takedown pins snapped into place. She pulled back the charging handle, inspected the chamber, set the completed rifle on the table. Complete silence. Every Marine was staring, not just at the assembled weapon, at the old woman who'd made it look effortless. Nell looked at the thin Marine, the nervous one who'd been struggling the most. "What's your name, son?" "Private Deacon Walsh, ma'am." His voice cracked slightly. Young, maybe 19. "Deacon, would you like me to show you again?" Slowly this time, "so you understand why each step matters." He nodded, unable to speak. For the next hour, Eleanor Vaughn became Gunner Vaughn again. She broke down the M27 and reassembled it, explaining each component's function, each potential failure point, each maintenance consideration. The three young Marines hung on every word, asking questions, trying it themselves under her patient guidance. She corrected their errors gently, showed them tricks for remembering assembly sequences, shared insights from 4 decades of experience. The weapon is a tool, she told them, but it's also a responsibility. You need to know it intimately, not just mechanically, but philosophically. Understand what it can do, what it can't do. Respect both. Deacon Walsh was the first to successfully complete the assembly under Nell's guidance. His hands still shook with concentration, but he got every step right. When the final pin clicked into place, he looked up at Nell with undisguised gratitude. "Thank you, Gunner. I'm sorry I dismissed you." "You didn't know," Nell replied. "And honestly, I'm just an old woman most days. But weapons, I understand." The Boston kid stepped forward. His name was Griffin Hayes, stocky, working-class accent, the kind of kid who used bravado to cover insecurity. "Ma'am, what I said before, about grandmothers, that was disrespectful. I apologize." Nell studied him for a moment, saw the genuine shame in his face. "Apology accepted, but let me tell you something, son. My grandmother fled Poland in 1939 with nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's rifle. She walked across Europe, fought with partisans, survived things that would break most people. Never underestimate grandmothers. They're tougher than you'll ever be." That got a laugh, breaking the tension. Even Griffin smiled, though his face was still red. The session ended with all three Marines qualifying successfully on the M27. Their target groups tight and consistent, proof that understanding the weapon led to better performance. Colonel Sullivan had watched the entire session. When Nell finally stepped back, declaring the Marines ready for live fire qualification, he approached with a serious expression. "Ma'am, I'm going to be direct. We have a problem in this battalion. Hell in the entire Corps. We're transitioning to new weapon systems faster than we can train instructors. We've got gaps in institutional knowledge. We need people like you." Nell shook her head. "I'm retired colonel. Have been for 15 years. "I know, but ma'am, we have a civilian contractor program for retired warrant officers. Training and consultation. You could work part-time, set your own schedule. Come in when we need expertise on new systems or when we're having trouble with training protocols." Sullivan's voice dropped lower, more urgent. "Gunner, I'm not exaggerating when I say you could save lives. Marines who don't understand their weapons properly in combat, that's how people die. That's how we lose the best of the next generation." Nell was quiet for a long moment. Her gaze drifted across the rifle range, watching other Marines train in the distance. She thought about her empty apartment, her silent days, the endless hours of watching life from the sidelines. Watching but not participating. Existing but not living. "I'd have to think about it," she said finally. "Of course, but please do, ma'am. We need you. The Corps needs you." Sullivan extended his hand. "It would be an honor to work with you again." Nell shook his hand, felt something stir in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she still mattered. The session ended, the three young Marines qualifying successfully, their target groups tight, proof that understanding led to performance. Nell watched from the observation area, back where she'd started, but everything had changed. Sergeant Thornton approached her before leaving. "Ma'am, I apologize for how I spoke to you earlier. It won't happen again." You were protecting your Marines in your training area, Nell replied. That's your job. I respect that. Still, I should have shown more respect. He hesitated. Would you be willing to come back if Colonel Sullivan's offer works out? We could use someone with your knowledge. Nell found herself smiling, genuinely smiling for the first time in months. I might just do that, Sergeant. The sun was climbing higher over Camp Pendleton. Nell stood at the fence line watching Marines train. But she wasn't just watching anymore. She was part of it again, connected to something larger than herself. The young Marines who'd dismissed her that morning would remember this lesson. Not just about rifle assembly, about the danger of judging by appearances, about the wisdom that age can carry, about respect. But as Nell walked back to her car, as the adrenaline of the morning started to fade, another feeling crept in. The weight of memory, the shadow of the past. Colonel Sullivan wanted her back, wanted her expertise, wanted her to prevent the kind of mistakes that cost lives. But Sullivan didn't know. Nobody here knew about the mistake she'd already made, the one that still haunted her 16 years later. That evening, Nell sat in her apartment, one bedroom, Spartan, the possessions of someone who'd spent a lifetime in service and accumulated nothing but expertise. On her desk was a locked file drawer. She hadn't opened it in 3 years, not since Robert died, not since she'd been alone with her memories and her guilt. She opened it now. Inside were documents, official Marine Corps paperwork, incident reports, medical discharge forms, all stamped with dates from October 2008, and a photograph. A young Marine in dress blues, 22 years old, brown hair, bright eyes, the kind of face that looked like it smiled easily. Before, Lance Corporal Marcus Brennan. The flashback came like it always did, unbidden, unwelcome, unavoidable. October 15th, 2008, Quantico, Virginia. The weapons testing range where Nell had spent half her career. She'd been testing a modified M4A1 carbine, upgraded gas system, supposed to provide better reliability in extreme conditions. The kind of incremental improvement that saved lives in ways the civilian world never understood. They'd run 346 rounds through the weapon, all performing to spec, everything nominal. Nell had been ready to sign off, to approve the modification for field testing with operational units. But the protocol required 500 rounds, so they continued. Lance Corporal Marcus Brennan had volunteered as the test shooter, young, enthusiastic, recently married, his wife 8 months pregnant with their first child. Round 347, the gas port ruptured, not dramatically, not like in movies where weapons explode in showers of sparks, just a small failure, a 0.002-inch variance in the port diameter that Nell had missed in the initial inspection. But at the moment of firing, with 55,000 psi of pressure behind a 5.56 millimeter round, that small variance became catastrophic. The gas blowback hit Marcus in the face, superheated was in carbon particulate. He'd been wearing eye protection, but not rated for that kind of pressure. The right lens shattered. Nell had been 15 feet away. She'd heard the sound, different from a normal shot. A sharp crack followed by Marcus screaming, dropping the rifle, hands to his face, blood between his fingers. The medical response had been immediate, but the damage was done. Marcus lost his right eye completely, suffered traumatic brain injury from the pressure wave, spent 6 weeks in the hospital, another 3 months in rehabilitation. Medical discharge. Honorable, but still a discharge. No more Marine Corps, no more career, no more future in the profession he'd loved. His wife left him while he was still in rehab, took the baby when it was born, a boy he'd never met. Divorce finalized before Marcus was even released from medical care. The official investigation cleared Nell, called it an equipment failure, not operator error. The gas port had been within manufacturing tolerance when installed. Metal fatigue over 346 rounds had caused the variance. Not her fault, not technically, but Nell knew the truth. She should have inspected that port after every 100 rounds, should have caught the metal fatigue developing, should have seen the microscopic cracks forming. She'd been thorough, but not thorough enough. One young Marine paid the price for her not quite good enough. Nell had requested retirement 2 years later. She could have stayed until mandatory retirement at 60, but she couldn't. She couldn't keep testing weapons, knowing that one mistake, one oversight, one moment of being 99% instead of 100% could destroy someone's life. So she'd left, walked away from the career that defined her, spent 15 years trying to forget, trying to convince herself she'd done enough, trying to believe she didn't owe anything more, and failing. Because every day she read the Marine Corps Times, every day she drove to Camp Pendleton, every day she watched young Marines train with weapons she'd helped develop, every day wondering if today would be the day another Marcus Brennan paid for someone's oversight. Colonel Sullivan's offer sat on the table next to the photograph, a chance to come back, to use her expertise again, to maybe prevent another accident, but also a chance to fail again, to make another mistake, to destroy another life. Nell closed the file drawer, locked it, but she couldn't lock away the memories. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she was back at Camp Pendleton. Same coffee, same newspaper, same ritual. But this time when she arrived at the observation area, Colonel Sullivan was waiting. "Gunner, I wasn't sure you'd come back." "I wasn't either," Nell admitted. "Have you thought about my offer?" Nell looked out at the rifle ranges, young Marines preparing for a world that would ask everything of them. "I need to tell you something first. Something you should know before you decide if you really want me back." She told him about Marcus Brennan, the whole story, no minimizing, no excuses, just the facts of what happened when she wasn't good enough. Sullivan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How many Marines did you train in 43 years?" "I don't know, thousands." "How many weapons did you test?" "Hundreds." "How many malfunctions did you catch before they reached the field?" "I don't keep count, Colonel." "I do, because I looked up your service record after yesterday. Want to know what I found?" Nell said nothing. "In 1983, you identified a firing pin defect in the M249 that would have caused catastrophic failures, prevented an estimated 200 casualties. That was my job. In 1991, you redesigned the M4 buffer spring assembly, reduced malfunction rates by 47%, saved an estimated 500 Marines from weapon failures in combat. Colonel, in 2006, you caught a batch of counterfeit parts in the M16 supply chain. Parts that would have failed under combat stress, prevented an estimated 73 casualties." Sullivan stepped closer. "You made one mistake in 43 years. One. And it wasn't even a mistake. It was equipment failure that no reasonable person could have predicted. You've spent 16 years punishing yourself for being human. That Marine is still alive because you got the medical response there in under 90 seconds. I read the report, Gunner. You performed triage, applied pressure to the wound, kept him from going into shock. The doctors said your immediate action saved his life." Nell felt tears on her cheeks. She hadn't cried about Marcus Brennan in years, thought she was past it. He lost everything. He lost his eye. He lost his career. Both terrible things. But he didn't lose his life, and the modifications you made to testing protocols after that incident have prevented 17 similar accidents in the last 16 years. I checked. Sullivan's voice softened. "Gunner, you can't undo what happened, but you can prevent it from happening to others. That's not about guilt. That's about purpose." Nell wiped her eyes, looked at the rifle ranges, thought about Deacon Walsh and his nervous hands, Griffin Hayes and his bravado, the thin line between confidence and competence. 2 weeks, she said, trial period. If I make one mistake, one oversight, I walk away and you don't try to stop me. Deal. They shook hands. Eleanor Vaughn was coming back. 3 days later, Nell reported for her first official day as a civilian weapons consultant. They'd given her a small office in the training wing, a desk, a computer she barely knew how to use, a nameplate that read CW4, Eleanor Vaughn, retired, senior weapons advisor. Her first class was scheduled for 900, 12 Marines, including Deacon Walsh, Griffin Hayes, and Sawyer Bennett, the quiet one from that first day. Nell arrived at 0830, set up her materials, waited. The Marines filed in at 0855. Professional, attentive. But she could see the questions in their eyes, the uncertainty. Who was this old woman really? Could she teach them anything they didn't already know? At precisely 0900, another figure appeared in the doorway. Captain Wyatt Brennan, 36 years old. Infantry officer, not related to Marcus, just a common surname. But he had the particular kind of confidence that came from youth and success, untempered by failure. Gunner Vaughn, he nodded politely. Mind if I observe? I'm the battalion training officer. Like to see what our contractors are teaching. Translation. I'm here to evaluate whether you're worth the money we're paying you. Of course, Captain. Please. Nell began the class. Basic M27 maintenance and troubleshooting. The fundamentals that every Marine needed but that got overlooked in the rush to advanced tactics. 30 minutes and Captain Brennan interrupted. Gunner, with all respect, we have computerized diagnostic systems now. Smart optics, digital fire control, the kind of manual fieldcraft you're teaching, it's legacy knowledge. Important historically, but the future is technological integration. The Marines shifted uncomfortably. This was a challenge. Polite professional, but still a challenge. Nell set down the rifle she'd been demonstrating with. You're absolutely right, Captain. Technology is the future. So let's test that. She walked to the window. Outside, the weather had turned. Gray clouds rolling in from the Pacific. Rain starting to fall. The kind of cold November rain that soaked through everything. There's a qualification range active right now, 200 yards. How about we both take a turn, you with your digital optics and computer-assisted targeting, me with iron sights. See which approach works better in real conditions. Captain Brennan smiled, confident. I'd be happy to, ma'am. 20 minutes later, they were both on the range, rain falling steadily now, the kind of weather that made everything harder. Captain Brennan went first, his M4 equipped with an ACOG scope and laser designator. State of the art. He took his position, acquired targets began firing. The optic fogged almost immediately, rain on the lens creating glare. The laser designator useless in the precipitation. He wiped the lens, tried again, adjusted, compensated. When the smoke cleared, he'd hit 31 of 50 targets. Nell's turn. She took the same M4, removed the ACOG, flipped up the iron sights. Backed up sights that most Marines never used anymore. Took her position, old knees protesting. Arthritis making her fingers stiff. But her hands knew what to do. She fired. The rhythm was meditative. Breathe, acquire, squeeze. The fundamentals beaten into her 50 years ago and never forgotten. When she finished, the range officer called out the score. 49 of 50, one miss at target, 42. Nell stood, joints protesting. Walked back to where Captain Brennan stood. Technology is wonderful, Captain. It makes us faster and more accurate 99% of the time. But that 1% when it fails, when the batteries die or the optic fogs or the computer glitches, you need to know the fundamentals. Because the fundamentals don't fail. They just require someone who's practiced them 10,000 times. Captain Brennan stared at her, then slowly nodded. Point taken, Gunner. I apologize for the interruption. No apology needed. Questions make us better. That's why I'm here. Back in the classroom, the Marines looked at Nell differently. Not with the polite tolerance they'd started with respect, with attention. She continued the lesson. That night, Nell stayed late, working on lesson plans for the next week, reviewing technical specifications for new weapon systems the Corps was considering. Around 2,000 hours, there was a knock on her office door. Deacon Walsh stood there, still in utilities, looking uncertain. Gunner, do you have a minute? Of course, Deacon. Come in. He sat, nervous energy radiating off him, young man trying to find the words. I wanted to thank you for what you taught us that first day, for coming back. You're welcome, but you don't need to thank me for doing my job. It's more than that. He hesitated. My father was a Marine before I was born. He got hurt, bad injury during a weapons test or something. My mom never told me the details. Nell's blood went cold. He was medically discharged. I never met him. He and my mom split up before I was born. She remarried when I was 3. My stepdad adopted me, changed my last name to Walsh. What was your father's name? Nell asked, though she already knew, already felt the universe's cruel sense of irony closing around her. Marcus Brennan. There it was. I joined the Marines to understand him, I guess, to maybe make him proud even though he doesn't know I exist. Mom said he's homeless in San Diego somewhere, drinking. She said the war broke him, but he was never in a war. Just a training accident that took his eye. Deacon looked at Nell. I want to be the Marine he never got to be. Does that make sense? Nell couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The boy sitting in front of her, eager and earnest and trying so hard, was the son of the man whose life she'd destroyed. Marcus's baby, born 3 months after the accident. The child Marcus had never met because his wife left while he was still in rehabilitation. And Nell had spent the last week training him, mentoring him, without knowing, without recognizing the cruel symmetry. Gunner, are you okay? Nell forced herself to nod. Yes, sorry, just reminded me of someone. Did you know a lot of Marines in your time? Thousands, but yes, I knew some very well. She looked at Deacon, saw Marcus in his features, the shape of his gym, the way he held himself. Your father would be proud of you, Deacon. I'm certain of that. You think so? I know so. After he left, Nell sat in the dark office for 2 hours. The universe had given her a chance at redemption, or perhaps a chance to fail again. She wasn't sure which, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would make Deacon Walsh into the best Marine the Corps had ever seen. She would give him everything his father never got to have, every skill, every advantage, every piece of knowledge she possessed, not to ease her guilt. Guilt couldn't be eased. But because Deacon deserved it, because Marcus deserved to have a son who succeeded where he'd been robbed of the chance, and because maybe, just maybe, if she could do that, she could live with herself. Nell locked her office, walked to her car, drove home through the rain. Tomorrow she would continue teaching, continue passing on knowledge, continue trying to be good enough. And somewhere in San Diego, Marcus Brennan lived on the streets broken and alone, not knowing his son was learning to be a Marine from the woman who'd taken everything from him. The weight of that knowledge sat on Nell's chest like a stone, but she carried it. She'd carried worse, and she'd keep carrying it for as long as it took, because that's what purpose meant. That's what redemption required. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just the daily choice to be better than you were yesterday, to give more than you take, to leave the world a little less broken than you found it, even if you could never quite fix what you'd broken yourself. 3 weeks became a rhythm. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Nell arrived at Camp Pendleton at 0730, coffee at the same diner. Marine Corps Times read cover to cover. Then to her office in the training wing, where 12 Marines waited to learn what decades of experience could teach. Deacon Walsh was always early, first one in the classroom, last one to leave. His notebook filled with careful diagrams of weapon components, troubleshooting flowcharts, maintenance schedules, the kind of meticulous attention that separated competent Marines from exceptional ones. Nell watched him and saw ghosts. Marcus Brennan had been meticulous too, 22 years old and already showing the signs of someone who'd rise through the ranks. Before the gas port rupture, before the screaming, before everything went dark. Now Marcus's son sat in the front row asking questions about bolt carrier tolerances and gas system pressures, and Nell answered each one with the kind of patience she'd never shown her own daughter. The irony wasn't lost on her. Griffin Hayes had transformed over the 3 weeks. The Boston bravado was still there, but tempered now. He'd stopped trying to impress everyone and started trying to learn. Stayed after class twice a week to practice disassembly drills. His hands were getting faster, more confident. During a break one Thursday, he approached Nell's desk. "Gunner, can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Why'd you come back?" "After 15 years retired, you could have stayed gone. Why come back to this?" Nell set down the bolt carrier group she'd been inspecting. "You know why you joined the Marines, Griffin? To prove something to my old man. He wanted me at Harvard Law. I wanted to be anywhere but." "Did it work? Did you prove it?" Griffin considered. "Don't know yet. Haven't talked to him since I shipped to boot camp." "Then you're doing this for the wrong reason. You can't prove anything to someone who isn't watching. You can only prove things to yourself." She picked up the bolt carrier, again turned it in her hands. "I came back because sitting in an empty apartment watching the world turn without me isn't living. It's just waiting to die. At least here I matter, even if it's only to 12 Marines who'll forget my name in 5 years. We won't forget Gunner. Yes, you will. And that's fine. What matters is what I teach you stays in your hands. The knowledge, the skills. That's how we outlive ourselves." Griffin nodded, started to leave, turned back. "My dad called last week. First time in 8 months. Said he heard I was doing well. Asked if I was happy." "What did you tell him?" "Told him I'm becoming something. Don't know what yet, but something that matters." "Good answer." After he left, Nell sat alone in the classroom. Thought about Vivian. 12 years since they'd really talked. Not since Robert's funeral, and even that had been lawyers and estate planning, not conversation. Thought about calling her, picked up the phone twice, put it down twice. Some distances were too far to cross with a phone call. Sawyer Bennett was the quiet one. 19 years old and barely spoke unless spoken to. Orphaned at 12. Bounced through foster homes until he aged out at 18. Joined the Marines because he had nowhere else to go. He learned through observation. Watched Nell's hands during demonstrations with absolute focus. Mimicked her movements exactly. Never asked questions, but somehow absorbed everything. One afternoon, Nell found him in the armory after hours practicing assembly drills alone. "How long have you been here, Sawyer?" He looked up startled. "Just an hour." "Gunner, am I not supposed to be here?" "You're fine. I'm asking because you've done this drill about 500 times in the last 3 weeks. You're already faster than anyone in the class." Trying to get to your speed, ma'am. I've been doing this for 50 years. You've got time. Yes, ma'am, but time's the only thing I've got plenty of. Nell understood that, the loneliness in his voice. The way he treated the Marines as family because he'd never had another one. You ever think about what comes after the Marines, Sawyer? No, ma'am, this is it for me. I'll do my 20 and see where I am then. That's a long time to not think about the future. Respectfully, Gunner, the future's been pretty unkind. I'll take today and let tomorrow sort itself out. Nell couldn't argue with that philosophy. She'd been living it herself for 15 years. The fourth week brought desert training. Mojave Desert, 3 hours inland from Camp Pendleton. Temperature at noon hitting 45 degrees Celsius. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned vehicles into ovens. 12 Marines plus Nell, Colonel Sullivan, and Sergeant Thornton, field testing the M27S under extreme conditions. The real test wasn't the rifle range at Pendleton. It was here where sand got into everything and heat stress was as dangerous as enemy fire. They ran through qualification courses, 200-meter targets in full gear, stress positions, time drills, everything designed to push the Marines and the weapons to their limits. Deacon performed well. 43 of 50 targets, solid score under difficult conditions. Griffin struggled with the heat, 37 of 50, but he kept pushing, didn't quit. Sawyer was consistent as always, 45 of 50, mechanical precision even when his utilities were soaked with sweat. Then came Sawyer's second run. He was at round 140 when the rifle jammed. Not a simple failure to feed. A hard jam. Bolt locked halfway closed, round chambered, but not fully seated. Sawyer executed immediate action drill. Tap rack assess, nothing. The bolt wouldn't move. Cease fire, Sergeant Thornton called out. Weapon malfunction on the line. Nell was there in seconds. Took the rifle from Sawyer, felt the resistance in the charging handle. When did you last clean this? Last night, Gunner. Full disassembly. I checked everything. Nell cleared the weapon, ejecting the stuck round with effort. Inspected the chamber. What she saw made her blood run cold. Carbon buildup. Excessive carbon buildup. 3 times what should accumulate in 140 rounds. She field stripped the rifle right there. Examined the gas system. The bolt carrier group. The gas piston assembly. There it was, the gas port. Slightly oversized. Not by much. Maybe 0.003 inches larger diameter than specification. Barely visible without precision measuring tools. But in this heat with this ammunition, that small variance was causing gas pressure to spike. More gas meant more carbon pushed into the system. More carbon meant accumulation. Accumulation meant malfunctions. And in combat, malfunctions meant deaths. Nell felt the weight of 2008 settle on her shoulders. Different weapon, different failure mode, but the same fundamental problem. Gas system variance. The kind of thing that looked fine on paper but killed people in reality. Colonel Sullivan, I need to speak with you. Now. They walked away from the line, out of earshot of the Marines. We have a problem, sir. Gas port sizing issue. This M27 is venting excessive pressure in extreme heat conditions. That's causing accelerated carbon buildup. In another 100 rounds, this weapon would have failed catastrophically. Sullivan's face went serious. How catastrophic? Best case, total malfunction. Worst case, gas blowback into the shooter's face. I've seen it happen. It's not pretty. What do you recommend? Halt all M27 deployment immediately. Pull every rifle back for inspection. Don't let another Marine fire one of these until we've verified gas port specifications on every single weapon. Nell, we just took delivery of 2,500 M27s. That's a $52 million procurement. If I halt deployment, I need ironclad evidence. This rifle is your evidence? Run metallurgy tests. You'll find the variance. One malfunction isn't enough for the general to authorize a recall. You know that. Nell did know that. The bureaucracy of military procurement, the cost analysis, the political considerations. But she also knew what happened when bureaucracy overruled safety. Then give me 3 weeks and 600 test rounds. I'll document every malfunction. Provide statistical analysis. Give you the evidence you need. Sullivan looked at her carefully. That's a lot of shooting. You're 76 years old, Gunner. Your arthritis is already bothering you. I'm aware of my age, Colonel, but I'm the only one here who knows exactly what to look for. I've seen this failure mode before. I won't let it happen again. The general won't like it. The general doesn't have to like it. He has to listen to data. Sullivan nodded slowly. I'll get you the ammunition and the range time. But Nell, if you're wrong about this, it's going to cost both of us. I'm not wrong. That night, Nell worked until midnight, designing test protocols, statistical analysis frameworks, documentation procedures, every detail meticulously planned because she'd only get one chance to make her case. The testing began the next Monday. Nell personally fired 400 rounds over 2 weeks, documented every malfunction, every jam, every failure to feed, measured gas pressure, analyzed carbon accumulation, built the kind of comprehensive data set that couldn't be dismissed. Her hands swelled from the repetitive stress, arthritis flaring up worse than it had in years. She started taking ibuprofen like candy, slept 4 hours a night. Colonel Sullivan tried to get her to slow down. "Gunner, you're destroying yourself over this. Let some of the younger Marines handle the test firing. They won't know what to look for. I will. You can barely hold a coffee cup. Your hands are shaking. They'll hold a rifle, that's what matters." By day 12, Nell had the data she needed: 63 malfunctions in 600 rounds, 10.5% failure rate overall. In extreme heat conditions, 18%. Statistically significant, operationally unacceptable, potentially lethal. She compiled everything into a presentation: graphs, charts, photographs of carbon buildup, metallurgy analysis of the gas ports, comparison to manufacturer specifications. 47 slides of evidence that the M27 as currently delivered was not safe for combat deployment. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. General Bradford, Colonel Sullivan, Captain Brennan, the entire command staff. Wednesday night, Nell collapsed. Not dramatically, no clutching her chest or falling to the floor. Just a quiet moment in her apartment where her legs stopped working and she sat down hard on the kitchen floor and couldn't get back up. Pain in her chest, left arm tingling. The classic signs she'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. She managed to reach her phone, called 911, waited on the floor until the paramedics arrived. Minor cardiac event, the doctor said. Not a full heart attack, but stress-induced cardiac distress. Her body's way of saying it had limits, even if her will didn't. They kept her for 2 days, monitoring, tests, lectures from young doctors about taking care of herself. On Thursday afternoon, Colonel Sullivan came to the hospital, brought the presentation materials. "I delivered it for you, Gunner, to the command staff." And General Bradford was impressed, disturbed but impressed. He's authorizing a full recall. All 2,500 M27s going back to Heckler and Koch for gas port inspection and remediation. Nell closed her eyes. Relief flooding through her. There's more. I showed them the classified report from Syria. French forces using HK-416 had similar failures in extreme heat. 14% malfunction rate. 3 KIA attributed to weapon failures during contact. I didn't know about Syria. It was classified, but it validated everything you found. You were right to push this, Nell. You just saved a lot of lives, probably hundreds. At the cost of what I can barely walk without my chest hurting. At the cost of your health, which is why I'm ordering you to take 2 weeks off. Full recovery. No arguments. Colonel, that's not a request, Gunner. You're no good to the Marines dead. Take care of yourself. The work will be here when you get back. That evening, another visitor came to the hospital room. Dr. Vivian Vaughn, 48 years old, looking older than she should, the way people do when they carry grudges that weigh more than they realize. "Mom, Vivian, I didn't expect you. Colonel Sullivan called me, said you were in the hospital, cardiac event. Minor, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're 76 years old, working yourself to death for an organization that's already taken everything from you." Nell didn't have the energy to argue. "What do you want me to say?" Vivian sat in the visitor chair, looked at her mother with something between anger and fear. "I want you to tell me why. Why this matters so much that you'd die for it. Why the Marines get your everything when your own family got nothing. That's not fair, isn't it? You missed my 14th birthday because of a weapons test, my high school graduation because you were at Quantico, my wedding because you had to certify some rifle system, and when Dad was dying when he was in hospice and calling for you, you were in Afghanistan fixing guns for strangers." The words hit like physical blows. All true, all unforgivable. Your father understood. Dad enabled you. There's a difference. He loved you so much he let you destroy our family to chase some idea of duty, and I'm the one who paid for it. Nell looked at her daughter, really looked, saw the 12-year-old who'd waited for a mother who never came, the 16-year-old who'd stopped hoping, the adult who'd built a successful life despite not because of her upbringing. "You're right," Nell said quietly. About all of it. I chose duty over you, over your father, over everything that should have mattered more. And I can't undo that. I can't give you back those years. So why are you doing it again? Why come back to this? You have nothing left to prove. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to fix something. What? In 2008, I made a mistake. Signed off on a weapon system that wasn't ready. A Marine got hurt, lost his eye, lost his career, lost everything. Nell's voice broke. He had a wife, a baby on the way. I took that future from him with my carelessness, and I've carried that for 16 years. So this is about guilt. This is about preventing it from happening to someone else. That Marine's son is in my class now, Deacon Walsh. He doesn't know I'm the one who destroyed his father's life, but I'm training him, making sure he has every advantage his father never got, making sure no mistake of mine ever hurts him. Vivian was quiet for a long time. You're trying to save someone else's child because you couldn't save our relationship. Maybe. I don't know. All I know is that sitting in an empty apartment waiting to die isn't living. At least here I matter. At least here I can prevent some harm. And what about the harm you caused me? Does that not matter? It matters more than anything, but I can't fix it. I can only acknowledge it and try to be better going forward, if you'll let me. Vivian stood, walked to the window, looked out at the parking lot where Marines and utilities moved with purpose toward missions that mattered. I became a surgeon to save people my own way, without leaving my family behind. I thought I was better than you. You are better than me. But I'm not happy. I'm successful and alone, and I don't know how to be anything else. Just like you. She turned back to her mother. I can't forgive 30 years overnight. The resentment is too deep. But I'll stay for the next 2 weeks. Help you recover. Maybe we can start talking. Really talking. Not about the past, about now. Nell felt tears on her face. I'd like that. Vivian stayed in California for 2 weeks, visited the hospital daily. Then when Nell was discharged, stayed at her apartment, cooked meals, monitored her medications, acted like a daughter for the first time in 12 years. They talked, carefully at first. Surface things, the weather, Vivian's practice in Boston, Nell's work with the Marines. Then deeper. Vivian's failed marriage, Nell's loneliness after Robert died, the ways they'd both chosen careers over relationships and wondered too late if it was worth it. One evening, Vivian drove Nell to Camp Pendleton, to the observation area where this had all started. They watched Marines train in the distance, rifle fire echoing across the ranges. You really love this, don't you? Vivian said. I love what it represents. Purpose, service. The idea that what you do matters beyond yourself. I spent my whole childhood hating that idea, hating that it mattered more than me. It shouldn't have. You should have mattered most. I'm sorry it didn't. They stood in silence. Mother and daughter, separated by decades of hurt, but standing in the same place for the first time in years. Tell me about Deacon, Vivian said. The Marine whose father you hurt. Nell told her the whole story. Marcus Brennan, the gas port failure, the years of guilt, finding out Deacon was his son, and the impossible weight of that knowledge. Does Deacon know? No, and I don't know if I should tell him. What purpose does it serve except to burden him with my guilt? Maybe the purpose is honesty. Maybe he deserves to know who's teaching him and why. Or maybe I'm being selfish, using him to feel better about what I did to his father. Maybe both things can be true. Nell looked at her daughter. When had she become so wise? When did you get so smart? I had to raise myself. Makes you grow up fast. The words stung because they were true. 8 weeks after the cardiac event, the M27S came back from Germany, remediated, gas ports inspected and corrected, ready for deployment. General Bradford scheduled a qualification competition. Nell's students against an elite unit from Camp Lejeune, a demonstration that the training program worked, that the weapons were ready, that the Marine Corps could move forward. Deacon Walsh was selected as lead shooter for Nell's team, the best of her 12 students, the one who'd absorbed every lesson and turned it into performance. The night before the competition, he came to Nell's office. Gunner, I need to tell you something. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, it's just my father called. Marcus Brennan. First time I've heard his voice in 19 years. Nell's heart stopped. He heard about the competition somehow. Said he wants to come watch. Said he's proud of me, even though he has no right to be. What did you tell him? I told him to come. I don't know why. Part of me hates him for abandoning me, but part of me just wants him to see what I've become. That's understandable. I'm terrified I'll fail, that he'll watch me screw up and remember why he left. Nell wanted to tell him the truth then, that Marcus didn't leave by choice, that his father had been broken by forces beyond his control, that the man coming to watch was a victim of her mistake, not a villain in Deacon's story. But the words wouldn't come. You won't fail, Deacon. You're ready. I've made sure of that. Why do you care so much about me specifically? Griffin and Sawyer, you teach them well. But with me, it's different. I can feel it. Because I see your father in you, the Marine he should have been. And I want to make sure you get every chance he never had. It was as close to the truth as she could manage. Deacon nodded. Thank you, Gunner, for everything. After he left, Nell sat in the darkness of her office. Tomorrow, Marcus Brennan would be there, the man whose life she'd destroyed, watching his son compete, not knowing the woman who'd trained Deacon was the same one who'd taken everything from him 16 years ago. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Or perhaps it was giving her one final chance, to face what she'd done, to see the consequences, to understand that redemption wasn't about feeling better. It was about doing better even when it hurt. Nell locked her office, walked to her car. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not, and she had no idea if she'd survive it with her conscience intact. But she'd show up, she'd face it. Because that's what you did when you'd spent 43 years teaching Marines to stand their ground. Even when the ground was made of guilt and broken promises and the weight of lives you'd failed to save, you stood anyway. You stood because someone had to. And if you were Eleanor Vaughn, you stood because you'd forgotten how to do anything else. The night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from the base. Nell drove home through darkness thinking about tomorrow, thinking about Marcus and Deacon and Vivian and all the ways she'd tried to fix things by breaking herself, thinking about whether any of it mattered, and deciding for the 10,000th time that it had to, because the alternative was giving up. And Eleanor Vaughn had never learned how to do that. The morning of the competition arrived with fog rolling in from the Pacific. Thick gray mist that would burn off by noon but for now made Camp Pendleton feel isolated from the rest of the world. Like the only thing that existed was this moment, this place, these people about to collide. Nell arrived at 6:30, 2 hours before the scheduled start. She told herself it was to check the range setup, verify the weapons, ensure everything was prepared. But really, she just needed to be there. Needed to face what was coming with as much time as possible to build her courage. The rifle range was empty. Just the wooden shooting platforms and target stands marching out to 400 meters. The fog made everything beyond 200 meters invisible. Ghost targets in a ghost world. She heard footsteps behind her. Turned. A man approached from the parking area, limping slightly, wearing a worn Carhartt jacket that had seen better decades. His face was weathered in the way that spoke of hard living, not just hard years, scars visible even at a distance, and the right side of his face where his eyes should have been covered by a patch that looked military issue, but old. Faded. Marcus Brennan. Nell's breath caught. She'd known this moment was coming, had rehearsed it in her mind 1,000 times, but all her preparation evaporated when faced with the reality of him, older than she remembered, harder. The bright-eyed 22-year-old who'd volunteered for weapons testing was gone, replaced by someone who'd survived things that killed softer men. He recognized her immediately, stopped 10 feet away. Gunner Vaughn. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much, like the years on the street had worn it down along with everything else. I never thought I'd see you again. Marcus? Nell's voice barely worked. I didn't know you'd be here this early. Couldn't sleep. Drove down from San Diego at 0400. Been sitting in the parking lot trying to decide if I should actually go through with this. Seeing your son compete. Seeing my son at all. It's been 19 years. He was 3 months old last time I held him. Now he's a Marine and He gestured at himself. The worn jacket, the limp, the eye patch. This. They stood in silence, the fog swirling between them. 16 years of consequences made flesh. I don't hate you, Marcus said finally. I did for a long time, blamed you for everything. The pain, the disability, discharge, losing my family. Spent years drinking and hating and wishing you'd suffered like I suffered. I did suffer, not like you, but I carried what happened. I know. I saw the report years later, how you performed triage, called the medics, stayed with me until they arrived. The doctor said you saved my life with how fast you responded. Saving your life wasn't enough. You lost everything else. Yeah, I did. Marcus looked out at the fog, but hating you didn't give me anything back. Just made the whiskey taste better. Took me 14 years to figure out that anger was killing me faster than the injury ever could. When did you stop? 4 years ago. It got me into a program. PTSD treatment, substance abuse counseling. Took 3 tries before it stuck. Been sober since 2020. Got a job doing maintenance work. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest. He turned back to her. I'm trying to be someone my son doesn't have to be ashamed of. Probably too late, but I'm trying. Nell wanted to tell him then that she'd been training Deacon, that his son was exceptional, that Marcus's genes had given the world someone worth knowing, but the words tangled in her throat. Your son is a good Marine, she managed. You should be proud. I gave him nothing to be proud of. His mother raised him. Her new husband gave him a name and a life. I was just the ghost who sent child support checks when I remembered. You're here now. That counts for something. Does it, or am I just a painful reminder of what he came from? Before Nell could answer, vehicles started arriving, Marines and utilities, officers in crisp uniforms. The competition was 2 hours away, but people were showing up early, wanting good viewing positions, wanting to see if the legendary Gunnar Vaughn's students could actually perform. Marcus noticed the activity, started to retreat. I should go. Find a spot in the back where I won't be noticed. Marcus, wait. There's something you should know. But he was already walking away, disappearing into the fog like he'd never been there, like he'd spent so many years being invisible that it had become his natural state. Nell stood alone on the range, the weight of unsaid truths pressing on her chest worse than any cardiac event. By 0830, the fog had burned off. Clear skies. Temperature climbing toward 25 degrees Celsius. Perfect conditions for marksmanship. No excuses, just skill against skill. 2 teams assembled. Nell's students, 12 Marines, including Deacon, Griffin, and Sawyer. Against them, 5 elite shooters from Camp Lejeune's competition team. Marines who did this professionally, who trained year-round for marksmanship competitions, who had awards and ribbons that testified to their expertise. It should have been a mismatch. But Nell had spent 8 weeks teaching her Marines not just to shoot, but to understand. The fundamentals that didn't change. The principles that worked when technology failed. The muscle memory that carried you through stress and fear. General Bradford gave the opening remarks, thanked everyone for coming, explained that this competition was a demonstration of the new M27 system, a way to validate both the weapons and the training program. Then he introduced Nell, asked her to stand. The crowd applauded politely. Most of them had no idea who she really was. Just another contractor, another civilian sucking at the DoD funding trough. But the Marines who trained under her knew, and their applause was different, genuine, the kind you give to someone who'd actually taught you something that mattered. Nell saw Marcus in the crowd, back corner, trying to be invisible, but his good eye was locked on the Marines assembling at the firing line, searching for the son he'd never really known. The competition began. Stage 1, 50 meters, prone position, 50 rounds, standard qualification course. Deacon went first from Nell's team. Controlled breathing, steady hands, everything she'd taught him. 48 of 50 targets, 2 misses at targets 31 and 47. Still excellent. Griffin followed. 44 of 50, solid performance. Sawyer, 46 of 50, mechanical precision like always. The Lejeune team was good. Their scores ranged from 46 to 49. Professional, practiced, but not insurmountable. After stage 1, Nell's team was down by 4 points. Close enough to recover. Stage 2, 100 meters, kneeling position, more difficult, wind starting to pick up from the ocean. Deacon adjusted beautifully, compensated for wind without overthinking, 47 of 50. Griffin struggled slightly. The kneeling position aggravated an old shoulder injury from boot camp, 42 of 50. Sawyer steady, 45 of 50. Lejeune maintained their edge, but only by 6 points now. Stage 3, 200 meters, standing position, the hardest of the basic qualifications, where breath control and stance mattered more than equipment. This was where Nell's teaching showed. She drilled them endlessly on stance, on finding their natural point of aim, on breathing patterns that slowed the heart rate. Deacon approached the line, set his feet. The M27 felt familiar now. 8 weeks of training compressed into this moment. He began firing, each shot deliberate. Inhale, pause. Exhale halfway. Squeeze at the natural respiratory pause. Let the weapon do what it was designed to do. His body became the platform. Stable, unwavering. 49 of 50, only one miss. The crowd murmured. That was professional level performance. Griffin, 45 of 50, better than stage 2. He'd found his rhythm. Sawyer, 47 of 50, consistent as a machine. The Lejeune team was rattled now. Their shooters were excellent, but Nell's Marines were matching them. The lead narrowed to 2 points. Then came stage 4, 300 meters. Prone position again, but at distance where wind and heat shimmer mattered, where minor mistakes became misses. Deacon stepped to the line, loaded his magazine, took his position. Nell watched from the coaching area, saw him sight in, saw his breathing slow, everything perfect. Then she saw his head come up slightly, saw him look toward the crowd, saw his entire body stiffen. He'd spotted Marcus. For 19 years, Deacon had wondered what his father looked like, had imagined reunion scenarios, had built up stories in his head about why his dad had left. And now there Marcus was, scarred and worn and clearly damaged. The reality so much harder than any imagination. Deacon's hands started shaking. Nell wanted to call out, to tell him to focus, to bring his attention back to the fundamentals. But competition rules prohibited coaching during firing. She could only watch. Deacon fired. The first 10 rounds were scattered. Misses, compensations. He was thinking instead of shooting, fighting his emotions instead of his target. He managed to settle somewhat for the back 40 rounds. But the damage was done, 38 of 50. His worst performance of the entire 8 weeks, and it came at the worst possible moment. He stood from the firing line, face flushed, clearly fighting tears. Walked past Nell without making eye contact. Griffin and Sawyer shot well, but Deacon's poor performance had cost them. After stage 4, Nell's team was down by 15 points. Still recoverable, but they'd need perfect performance in the final stage. The break between stage 4 and 5 was 15 minutes. Deacon disappeared immediately. Nell found him behind the armory building, sitting on the ground, head in his hands. "I know you saw him," Nell said quietly. "How could I not? He's the only guy with an eye patch in the whole crowd. He came to watch you, to be proud of you. He doesn't get to be proud. He left. He chose to disappear. And now he shows up like it means something. It does mean something. It means he's trying to ease his guilt, to feel better about being a deadbeat." Nell sat down next to him, joints protesting. But she needed to be at his level for this conversation. "Your father didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because he was broken. Medical discharge. Lost his eye, lost his career. The man he was died in that accident, and he didn't know how to be anything else." "How do you know that?" Nell took a breath. This was it, the moment where she could tell the truth, could unburden herself, could make Deacon understand. But before she could speak, voices approached. Griffin and Marcus, together. Griffin was talking, that Boston accent carrying. "Sir, you should know something. Gunnar Vaughn, the one who's been training us, she's been working with your son every day, staying late, making sure he's the best Marine he can be. It's personal for her. I don't know why, but it is." Marcus looked at Nell, understanding starting to dawn in his expression. "Gunnar Vaughn has been training Deacon." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Deacon stood, looked between them. What does he mean, personal? What aren't you telling me? Nell stood too, slowly, wishing she was anywhere but here. But there was no escaping it now. "Deacon, I need to tell you something. About your father, about how he was injured." Marcus's face went hard. He understood now, understood the timing, understood why Nell had been so invested in his son. "You," Marcus said, voice low, "you've been training my son this whole time. I didn't know at first. When I found out, I couldn't tell him. I just wanted to give him what you never got to have." Deacon looked between them, confusion turning to comprehension. "What happened to my dad? How do you two know each other?" Marcus spoke before Nell could, his voice empty of emotion, the way people sound when they've relived trauma so many times it's lost the power to hurt. October 15th, 2008, Quantico Weapons Testing Range. I was the test shooter. Gunnar Vaughn was the weapons specialist. There was a malfunction. Gas port rupture. I lost my eye, lost my career, lost everything. The silence that followed was absolute. Deacon stared at Nell, the betrayal clear on his face. "You knew this whole time. You knew you were the one who ruined his life, and you didn't tell me. I wanted to help you, to make sure you had every advantage he never got. You used me to make yourself feel better about what you did." No, that's not. What else would you call it? You destroy my father's life, and then 16 years later, you show up and train his son. That's not charity. That's guilt. It is guilt, Nell said quietly, but it's also respect for what your father should have been, for what you can be. I don't want to be trained by the person who broke my family. Deacon turned and walked away, not toward the rifle range, toward the parking lot. Away from all of it, Colonel Sullivan appeared. He'd been watching from a distance, but the raised voices had drawn his attention. What's happening? Deacon's walking off the range. He knows, Marcus said. About 2008, about everything. Sullivan looked at Nell. Is he going to shoot the final stage? I don't know. The final stage was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Without Deacon, Nell's team couldn't win. They'd be short their best shooter. The entire 8 weeks of training would end in failure because she'd failed to be honest. Marcus was staring after his son. The longing on his face was painful to witness. 19 years of absence concentrated into one moment of desperate wanting. I'll talk to him, Marcus said. You don't have to, Nell started. Yeah, I do, because for once in his life, someone needs to tell that kid the truth. And it should be me. Marcus followed the path Deacon had taken, limping, determined. A broken man going to face the son who'd grown up without him. Nell stood frozen. Griffin put a hand on her shoulder. Gunner, you did what you thought was right. That's all any of us can do. What I thought was right destroyed their family. No, an accident destroyed their family. You've spent 16 years trying to fix it. Maybe that's not redemption. But it's something. 5 minutes to stage 5. The range officer was calling for shooters to assemble. The Lejeune team was already in position. Nell's team was gathering, but without Deacon, they were incomplete. Nell walked to the staging area, told Sawyer and Griffin to prepare. They'd shoot with 4 Marines instead of 5. Take the loss, learn from it, move on. Then she saw them, Marcus and Deacon, walking back toward the range together, not touching, the physical distance still vast, but moving in the same direction, talking in low voices. They reached the staging area. Deacon looked at Nell. His eyes were red, but his jaw was set. I'm shooting, he said. Deacon, you don't have to. My dad told me something. Said you saved his life that day, that you performed triage and kept him from bleeding out, that you've carried the guilt of his injury for 16 years, even though the official report cleared you. He took a breath. He said you didn't use me to feel better. You trained me because you wanted to make sure no Marine suffered like he did. That it wasn't about redemption, it was about responsibility. Marcus stepped forward, spoke to Nell directly. I also told him that holding on to anger doesn't change the past. It just poisons the future. I wasted 14 years being angry. I won't let him waste one day. Deacon picked up his rifle, the M27 that had been remediated, fixed, made safe by Nell's insistence on testing and data and refusing to let good enough be good enough. I'm going to shoot, not for you, not for him, for me, because I'm a Marine and Marines don't quit. Stage 5, 400 meters, moving targets, the most difficult stage, where wind and distance in target motion all combined to test every skill a shooter possessed. The Lejeune team went first, professional performance, scores ranging from 43 to 47. Good enough to maintain their lead unless Nell's team shot nearly perfect. Griffin shot 44 of 50, solid. Sawyer shot 46 of 50, consistent as always. The other 2 Marines from Nell's team, 41 and 43, good, but not enough. It came down to Deacon. He needed 47 of 50 to tie, 48 to win. He stepped to the firing line, loaded his magazine. The M27 familiar in his hands after 8 weeks of Nell's instruction, muscle memory taking over. He settled into position, controlled his breathing, found his natural point of aim. The target started moving. Mechanical silhouettes crossing at 400 meters. Fast enough to be challenging. Slow enough to be possible. Deacon fired. First round. Hit. Second. Hit. Third. Hit. Years of training compressed into seconds of execution. No thought required, just precision born from repetition. His body knew what to do. Nell had made sure of that. Round 4. The rifle jammed. Not a soft malfunction, a hard jam. The bolt locked partially closed, round chambered but stuck. The same symptom that Sawyer had experienced in the Mojave. The same malfunction that should have been fixed by the remediation. But this wasn't a gas port issue. This was different. Deacon executed immediate action drill. Tap rack assess. The bolt wouldn't move. He looked toward Nell, eyes wide. The kind of fear that comes when equipment fails and you don't know why. Nell was moving before she consciously decided to. Onto the range, violating protocol, not caring. Because she'd seen this before. Because she knew what a stuck round could become if handled wrong. She reached Deacon in seconds, took the rifle. Defective ammunition, she said. Round lodged in chamber. If you forced it, it could detonate. Same failure mode as 2008. Her hands moved with practiced precision. The crowd noise faded. The competition ceased to matter. There was only this moment. This weapon. This Marine who needed her to be perfect. Remove the magazine. Lock the bolt to the rear. Inspect the chamber. The round was visible, lodged at an angle. The primer already struck, but not fully detonated. Essentially a live round jammed in the weapon. Nell's training took over. 43 years of experience compressed into 60 seconds of absolute focus. Remove the upper receiver. Carefully. No jarring, no pressure on the round. Separate it from the lower. Set the lower aside. The upper receiver with the jammed round. Handle it like the bomb it essentially was. Gas plug removed. Pressure released slowly from the system. Cleaning rod from her pocket. She always carried one. Always prepared. Push the round from behind. Gentle pressure. Steady. No forcing. Let physics do the work. The round moved, millimeter by millimeter. Then free. Ejected safely into her hand. She inspected it. Saw the problem immediately. Defective primer. Soft strike. Partially detonated but not enough to fire the round. If Deacon had tried to force the bolt forward to fire again, the round would have detonated out of battery. Gas blowback into his face. Just like Marcus. But it didn't happen. Because she was here. Because she knew what to look for. Because 16 years of guilt had made her hypervigilant in ways that saved lives. She reassembled the rifle, cleared the chamber, loaded a fresh magazine from the ready rack, checked function. Everything worked. "You're clear," she said to Deacon. "Fresh magazine. Weapon is safe." She handed him the rifle. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe? Or forgiveness? Or just the shared knowledge that they'd both just escaped something terrible. Nell walked off the range, back to the coaching area. Realized her hands were shaking. Realized she'd just done in 60 seconds what would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. But this time it ended differently. Deacon returned to position. The range officer had stopped the clock during the malfunction. Competition rules. Equipment failure wasn't the shooter's fault. Deacon had 47 rounds left. Needed all of them. He fired. The sequence returned, smooth and practiced. Sight picture acquired. Wind compensation calculated by instinct. Trigger press clean and deliberate. The shooter and weapon became one system, functioning exactly as designed, exactly as Nell had trained. 47 rounds, 47 hits. Perfect score on the remaining rounds. Combined with his first 3 hits, 50 of 50, the crowd erupted. Because they just watched a Marine recover from catastrophic equipment failure and shoot perfect. Because they'd watched a 76-year-old woman save his life with nothing but knowledge and steady hands. Because they'd witnessed something rare. Excellence born from preparation meeting a crisis. Nell's team won by 8 points. But the victory felt secondary to what had just happened. To what had almost happened. To the way the universe had given her one more chance to get it right, and she had. Deacon came off the firing line, walked straight to Nell, wrapped her in a hug that lifted her off her feet despite his exhaustion. "Thank you," he said, "for everything, for training me, for saving me, for caring enough to be perfect when it mattered." Marcus approached, stood awkwardly. Father and son, and the woman who connected them in ways both terrible and redemptive. "You saved him," Marcus said, "the way you saved me. 16 years later, and you're still saving Marines I love. It's my job." "No, your job was testing weapons. This is something else. This is caring enough to be there when it matters. That's not a job, that's a calling." The 3 of them stood together, surrounded by celebrating Marines and curious onlookers. But in that moment, it was just them. 3 people bound by trauma and time, and the messy reality of trying to make things right when right was impossible. "I don't forgive easily," Marcus said to Nell. "Took me 14 years to forgive myself for being broken. But watching you save my son today, I think we're even. You gave me back something I never thought I'd have. A son who respects me. A chance to be part of his life. That's worth more than an eye." Deacon looked at his father. Really looked. Saw the scars and the wear and the damage. But also saw the man trying to be better. Trying to matter again. "I want you in my life," Deacon said. Not as some hero, just as my dad, broken and all. I can do that, Marcus said. If you'll let me try. They embraced, awkward. 19 years of distance doesn't disappear in a moment. But it was a start, the first step towards something that might someday be called healing. The awards ceremony was held an hour later. General Bradford presented the team trophy, made a speech about excellence in training and the future of Marine Corps marksmanship. Then he called Nell forward, presented her with the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal, the highest award DoD could give a non-military person, for 43 years of service to the Marine Corps and the defense of our nation, for preventing catastrophic failures that would have cost countless lives, for training excellence that continues to this day, for embodying the values of expertise, integrity, and selfless service. The crowd stood, Marines in utilities, officers in dress blues, civilians who'd come to watch, all of them on their feet applauding a 76-year-old woman who'd spent her entire adult life making weapons safer for people she'd never meet. Nell accepted the medal, made a brief speech, thanked the Marines who taught her as much as she'd taught them, thanked Colonel Sullivan for giving her a second chance, thanked the universe for letting her fix what she'd broken. As the applause faded, Deacon approached the podium. He held something in his hand. Gunner, if I may, I had something made for you. He held out a challenge coin. Marine Corps emblem on one side. On the other, custom engraved, the best teachers learn alongside their students. Semper Fi, November 2024. I had this made, Deacon said, for you, because you didn't just teach me weapons. You taught me what it means to carry a responsibility, to be accountable, to care enough to be perfect when it matters. Nell took the coin, felt the weight of it, not heavy but significant, the kind of object that would sit on a desk and remind you why the hard days were worth it. Thank you, Deacon. No, ma'am, thank you for everything. She would keep it on her desk, next to Robert's photograph, next to the picture of Vivian that she looked at every morning. A reminder that redemption wasn't erasing mistakes. It was making sure they taught you to be better. Then she saw Vivian in the back of the crowd. Her daughter had driven down from Los Angeles, had watched the entire competition, had seen her mother save Deacon's life, had witnessed firsthand what all those missed birthdays and graduations had been for. After the ceremony, Vivian approached. Mom, that was incredible. The way you cleared that malfunction. The knowledge, the precision. I finally understand. Understand what? Why you chose this. It's not that you love the Marines more than me. It's that you were genuinely good at this. Maybe the best. And when you're the best at something that saves lives, you can't just walk away because it's inconvenient for your family. I should have made room for both. That's on me. Maybe, but I should have understood sooner. I spent 30 years resenting you for being excellent at your calling. That's on me. They embraced. Mother and daughter, separated by decades, but finally in the same place emotionally. I'm moving my practice to San Diego, Vivian said. Opening a veterans health clinic here. I want to be closer, to actually know you while I still can. I'd like that. Me too, and Mom, I'm proud of you. I should have said that 30 years ago, but I'm saying it now. Nell's eyes filled with tears, the words she'd waited a lifetime to hear. Thank you, sweetheart. 6 months later, Nell worked 3 days a week as senior weapons consultant. The Vaughn Protocol had been adopted across the Marine Corps. Her methodical approach to testing and validation, her insistence on real-world conditions, her refusal to accept good enough when lives were at stake. Deacon, Griffin, and Sawyer had all been promoted to Lance Corporal. Deacon was selected for advanced infantry school. Griffin had overcome his family's disappointment and re-enlisted. Sawyer had found the family he'd always wanted in the Corps. Marcus attended AA meetings twice a week, had been promoted to lead maintenance supervisor at Camp Pendleton, met with Deacon every Sunday for coffee at the same diner where Nell read her Marine Corps Times. They were building a relationship slowly, learning each other as adults, making up for lost time not by pretending the past didn't exist, but by refusing to let it define the future. Vivian opened her practice in San Diego, specialized in treating veterans with PTSD and traumatic injuries. Had dinner with Nell every Wednesday without fail. They talked about medicine and weapons and the ways both professions tried to keep people alive in a world that wanted them dead. Talked about Robert, about the daughter's childhood Nell had missed, about building something new from the ruins of what had been. On a Thursday morning in May, Nell arrived at the rifle range for a new cycle of instruction. 12 Marines. Fresh faces, nervous hands, all of them struggling with the M27 the way everyone did before someone taught them the right way. One Marine in particular, a young woman, 18 years old. Corporal Jackson. Bright eyes and determination, but completely overwhelmed. Nell approached. Having trouble, Corporal. Yes, ma'am, this weapon system is completely different from what I trained on in boot camp. I can't get the handguard assembly to seat properly. May I show you? Are you one of the instructors? Just Nell. Here, let me demonstrate. She took the rifle. Her hands 76 years old and arthritis worse than ever, but still steady when it mattered, still certain. She assembled the M27, not in 53 seconds. Her personal time was up to 90 seconds now, age taking its toll. But the knowledge was still there, the understanding, the ability to teach. The secret is orientation, not force, Nell explained. You push here and rotate counterclockwise. Feel for the groove. Don't fight it. Let the parts guide you. Corporal Jackson tried. Got it wrong. Tried again. Got it right. Like that. Exactly like that. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. Eleanor Vaughn, but everyone calls me Gunner. The young Marine's eyes went wide. You're Gunner Vaughn, the Gunner Vaughn. Just Nell. Now let's see you do it again. Slower this time. Understanding matters more than speed. As the morning sun climbed higher and the fog burned off, and the familiar sounds of rifle fire echoed across Camp Pendleton, Eleanor Vaughn did what she'd done for 50 years. She taught. She guided. She passed on knowledge that would outlive her. She mattered not because she was perfect, but because she refused to stop trying to be better, to do better, to give the next generation every advantage she could provide. Marcus and Deacon watched from the observation area, father and son, both broken in different ways, both healing in the ways that mattered. Vivian sat with them, 3 generations bound by service and sacrifice, and the understanding that some things were worth the cost even when the cost seemed too high. And Nell, standing on a rifle range teaching a young Marine the same lessons she'd taught 1,000 times, felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not the peace of having no regrets. She had plenty of those. But the peace of knowing she'd done her best. Given her all, mattered in ways both large and small, made the world slightly safer for people she'd never meet. The camera pulled back slowly. Nell and Corporal Jackson, side by side, teacher and student, knowledge passing from one generation to the next, the eternal cycle that kept civilization moving forward. Fade to black. White text appeared on screen. Eleanor Vaughn continues to consult for the U.S. Marine Corps at age 76. The Vaughn Protocol for Weapons Testing and Validation has been adopted by 52 allied nations worldwide. She has trained over 4,000 Marines since returning from retirement in 2024. Private First Class Deacon Walsh graduated Advanced Infantry School with honors in 2025. He now serves as a weapons instructor at Camp Pendleton, carrying forward his gunner's legacy. Marcus Brennan celebrated 5 years of continuous sobriety in 2025. He works as lead maintenance supervisor at Camp Pendleton and mentors other veterans in recovery programs throughout San Diego County. Dr. Vivian Vaughn opened the Vaughn Veterans Health Clinic in San Diego, specializing in PTSD and traumatic injury treatment. Mother and daughter have dinner every Wednesday without fail. The challenge coin Deacon gave Eleanor sits on her desk next to photographs of her husband Robert and daughter Vivian. A reminder that purpose doesn't retire. It evolves. The text faded. One final image appeared. Nell's weathered hands guiding Corporal Jackson's young hands on the M27. Both sets of hands working together. Experience and youth, past and future, connected, then black.